words as gentle as a spring breeze, softly touching, quietly soothing the heart. But there are also words like blades, sharp enough to cut into the deepest part of one's soul. Language is invisible, yet it carries the power of life itself. It can make a withered heart bloom again, or silence a person forever. We grow up surrounded by conversations, using words to love, to care, to connect. But through those very words, we sometimes plant invisible wounds in each other's hearts without even realizing it. No one ever truly teaches us how to speak without causing pain. We think we're not violent, and yet we live in a world where words can wound like invisible arrows. They hide inside phrases that seem harmless. You're so careless. You're always like this. Or sometimes it's not even words, just a cold glance, or a silence that lasts too long. And suddenly, we no longer feel understood, no longer feel loved. Maybe you felt that too, wanting to speak just to be heard. But the more you talk, the farther the distance grows. Wanting to love, but somehow your way of loving ends up hurting the other person. So you keep explaining, keep trying, until one day you realize that no one is really listening anymore. And then you start to wonder, is there a way to speak without hurting anyone? Is there a way to love without having to sacrifice or endure? That's when I found Nonviolent Communication by Dr. Marshall Rosenberg, a book that doesn't just teach us how to speak, but how to listen, so that our words become bridges, not walls, so that we can love without hurting, understand without judging, and live with compassion, for ourselves and for others. This is Julian Gray, a place where you and I pause together amidst the noise of life, to learn how to speak with empathy, listen with kindness, and slowly grow into a calmer, deeper version of ourselves. Dr. Marshall Rosenberg was a clinical psychologist and the founder of the Center for Nonviolent Communication, a man who dedicated his life to studying the power of language and human connection. He believed that behind every conflict, no matter how small or large, lies an unmet need waiting to be understood. And only when we truly learn to listen can we touch another person's heart. His work, Nonviolent Communication, was honored by UNESCO for its contribution to peace. It's more than just a communication guide. It's a journey of awakening, helping us recognize the invisible forms of violence hidden in our daily speech. The words that unintentionally wound, that slowly drain love and build walls between hearts. The book reminds us that to truly love, it's not enough to speak correctly. We must speak with empathy, because sometimes a small shift in how we communicate can open an entire space of peace within our hearts and within our relationships. Before we learn how to speak with love, perhaps we should pause for a moment and ask ourselves, how have our words unknowingly cast shadows over the love we meant to give? When language unintentionally hurts the ones we love, the more we love, the easier it is to hurt each other. Not because love fades, but because of expectations. When a mother scolds her child, or when two people in love blame one another, is it because they've stopped loving? Or are they simply loving in the most clumsy way? The truth is, love is still there, just hidden beneath emotions that haven't been understood, buried under words that seem small but carry deep wounds. Dr. Marshall Rosenberg once said that behind every criticism lies an unmet need. The more we care, the more we expect. And those expectations, though born from love, often turn into pain. We want the other person to understand us, to respond the way we hope, to love us in the way we think is right. But in trying so hard to be understood, we forget. The other person also carries their own fears, their own hurts, their own limits. In love, we always believe we're giving our best. Yet sometimes the way we express it distorts what love was meant to be. A harsh word, a disappointed look, a small complaint. All these can make someone retreat and quietly close their heart. We never mean to hurt anyone. We just haven't learned how to speak in a way that lets the other person hear the love within our words. In nonviolent communication, Dr. Rosenberg describes 4 common ways of speaking that slowly drain the warmth from love. The first is moral judgment. When we measure others by our own standards, love turns into a courtroom. You're so selfish. You never understand me. These are no longer expressions of care, but verdicts. They make people defensive, closing their hearts behind invisible walls. The second is comparison. Look at other people's children. They can do it. Why can't you? We think we're motivating them, but in truth, comparison is an invisible blade. It kills confidence, leaving the other person feeling they'll never be good enough to be loved as they are. The third is denying responsibility. Words like, I have to, or I didn't have a choice sound harmless, but they quietly erase our freedom. When a tired mother sighs, I have to cook for everyone every day. Hidden inside that sentence is a longing to be seen, to be appreciated, to be cared for. Yet instead of bringing understanding, those words often plant guilt and tension. But if she were to say, I choose to do it because I love them, the feeling shifts, and love begins to feel lighter. The fourth is emotional coercion. When we say, you make me so sad, or if you love me, you should. We use our feelings to bind others. On the surface, it looks like love, but underneath lies a desire to control. That kind of communication turns love into obligation, making people afraid of disappointing us instead of wanting to make us happy. These 4 ways of speaking may seem ordinary, but they're like tiny cuts that slowly wear love down. They don't make love disappear, but they drain its strength until one day we're still together, yet no longer at peace. Love doesn't fade because we stop caring. It fades because we forget how to speak in ways that let love be understood. When we relearn how to speak, how to listen, and how to see the fears inside another person's heart, love finds its way back. Gentle, tender, just like it was in the beginning. What is nonviolent communication, and how to practice it? A single honest word can change the whole atmosphere of a room. When we speak with understanding, tension softens, and closed hearts begin to open. But the opposite is also true. A word spoken with judgment can silence someone, push them away, and leave a wound that lingers long after the conversation ends. Dr. Marshall Rosenberg called nonviolent communication the language of compassion, because he believed the way we speak and listen determines how much peace we can create in our relationships. Nonviolent communication isn't simply about being polite or avoiding conflict. It's about learning to connect from the heart instead of reacting from instinct. And to do that, Rosenberg teaches us to begin with 4 steps: observation, feeling, need, and request. The first step is to observe instead of judge. Most conflicts arise not from reality, but from our own interpretations of it. When we say, "You've been lazy lately," the other person immediately feels attacked and defends themselves. But if we say, "You've been late 4 times this week," we're describing facts, not opinions. That small difference creates a vast space between attack and understanding. Indian philosopher Krishnamurti once said, "To observe without evaluating is the highest form of intelligence." It's true not only in philosophy, but also in love. When we learn to look without labeling, we give others the freedom to simply be themselves. Rosenberg once quoted a poem, "I've never met a lazy person. I've only met someone who sometimes chooses to rest on rainy afternoons." That line reminds us that behind every behavior lies a reason, and behind every person lies a story waiting to be heard. The second step is to express your true feelings. When we hide our emotions, they turn into resentment. When someone says, "Do you even care about this family anymore?" And what they really mean is, "I feel sad because you didn't come home tonight." One is an accusation. The other is an invitation. Speaking your feelings isn't weakness, it's courage. Because only those brave enough to name their emotions can open the door to real understanding. Unspoken emotions don't disappear. They quietly turn into pain. We tell ourselves we've gotten used to silence, but deep inside, the heart is still crying for connection. Over time, those unspoken moments build up, becoming anger, distance, and loneliness within our own homes. Nonviolent communication invites us to pause before that happens, to express feelings with self-respect, not in the heat of frustration. The third step is to express your needs. Every emotion is the voice of an unmet need. When we feel sad, we may need to be heard. When we feel angry, we may need respect. When we feel disappointed, we may need acknowledgement. Instead of saying, "I'm upset you didn't come," try, "I'm upset because I wanted to share this moment with you." One blames, the other reveals. When we speak honestly about what we need, we're not being needy. We're teaching others how to love us better. And the final step is to make clear requests, not demands. Love cannot grow under pressure, and kindness cannot bloom under command. When we say, "If you cared about me, you would come with me," it's a form of control. But if we say, "I'd love for you to come, it makes me happy to share this with you," it becomes an invitation. One makes the other feel guilty for saying no. The other makes them want to say yes freely. And love can only survive when it's given in freedom. These 4 steps, observation, feeling, need, and request, may sound simple, but together they form the foundation of every healthy relationship. They're not communication techniques. They're a way of living, a way to pause before judging, to listen before reacting, and to love before hurting. Because when we learn to speak what we truly feel, the world begins to listen. Not just others, but the quiet part within us that has always longed to be understood and to be loved, gently and completely. Are you truly listening? Listening seems like the simplest thing in the world, yet it's one of the rarest abilities we're losing in the modern age. We live in a world where everyone wants to speak, to express, to prove themselves right. But the more we try to be heard, the more we forget the quiet art of listening. And in that constant noise, true listening has become almost a luxury. There's an old story about a young boy who once asked a monk, "Why does Buddha have big ears but a small mouth?" The monk smiled and said, "Because Buddha understood that listening is more important than speaking." Such a simple answer, yet enough to silence a person for a long time. We learn to speak when we are children, but it often takes a lifetime to learn how to listen. Most of us don't listen to understand. We listen to reply. While the other person is still speaking, our mind is already crafting an answer, a piece of advice, or a counter-argument, and in that very moment we lose presence. We lose the chance to truly touch the emotions behind their words. According to Dr. Marshall Rosenberg, there are 5 common ways people listen wrongly. The first is interrupting to give advice. When someone shares, we rush to help, to fix things for them, but often they don't need solutions. They just need to be heard. Even a well-meant suggestion can make someone feel small or incapable. The second is comparing. When someone speaks about their pain, we respond with, "I've been through the same," or "That's nothing, mine was worse." We think we're connecting, but comparison steals the spotlight. It shifts the focus from empathy to ego. Comparison is not understanding. It's using someone else's story as a mirror for our own. The third is comforting or denying emotions. When someone feels sad, we say, "Don't think about it," or "You'll be fine." Those words sound kind, but they erase the other person's feelings. Instead of feeling understood, they feel alone, unseen in their pain. The fourth is pity. When we say, "poor you," or "I'm lucky I'm not in your place," we unknowingly put ourselves above them. Pity is not compassion. Compassion stands beside someone. Pity stands over them. Compassion says, "I'm with you." Pity says, "I'm glad I'm not you." And the fifth is asking too many questions. We think we're showing care, but in truth, we're controlling the conversation. When someone has to keep explaining, they no longer feel listened to. They feel interrogated. All these forms of wrong listening share one thing in common. They come not from empathy, but from control. When we interrupt, compare, comfort, pity, or over-question, we're no longer listening. We're reacting. And when we react, we lose connection. True listening is an act of letting go. It's pausing the need to speak, quieting the noise inside your own mind, and simply being present. When we listen with the heart, people feel safe. They don't need to finish the sentence. We already understand. They don't need to pretend to be strong. We can see the softness underneath. There's a beautiful saying, "The ear is the path to the soul." Only when we truly listen can we enter another person's heart. Listening is not about replying. It's about touching the deepest part of someone, the place they only open when they feel understood and unjudged. Sometimes love doesn't need words. It only needs someone patient enough to listen to our whole story. In that moment, two hearts fall silent, yet understand more than 1,000 words ever could. Because listening is the gentlest form of love, a quiet way of saying, "I'm here, and I understand you," without having to say anything at all. When you learn to speak the language of compassion, when words come from compassion, they don't just change others, they transform you as well. Because the language of understanding isn't a skill to master, but a journey of transformation. It begins in the small conversations of everyday life, yet gradually reshapes the way we see ourselves, others, and the world around us. Nonviolent communication teaches us that to love well, we don't need eloquence, only honesty. To say what we truly feel, not to prove we're right, but to share what's alive in our hearts. When we speak with sincerity, words are no longer weapons of debate. They become threads of connection. The listener may not agree with us, but they can still feel the care behind every word. Only truth spoken with compassion can soothe the kind of wounds that reason alone cannot reach. The 4 steps of nonviolent communication, observation, feeling, need, and request, may sound simple, but in practice, they have the power to transform the way we live and love. First, they help us learn to love ourselves. To speak gently to others, we must first learn to speak gently to our own hearts. When we observe without judgment, we begin to see our fears, our limits, and our very human desires. We stop forcing ourselves to be strong all the time. We stop hiding our vulnerability. We learn to say, "I'm tired, I'm sad, I need a little rest." And when we allow ourselves to be understood, we become less shaken by the anger or sadness of others, because there is already peace within. Second, nonviolent communication helps us understand others more deeply. When someone is angry, complaining, or withdrawn, we no longer see them through the lens of judgment, but quietly ask, what need in them is going unmet? When we begin to see others as humans who are also struggling to be loved and understood, compassion naturally blossoms within us. Their anger no longer irritates us. It awakens our curiosity. And when understanding appears, conflict stops being a battlefield and becomes a bridge. Third, it teaches us to express emotions with maturity. We no longer suppress until we go silent, nor explode just to be heard. We learn to speak our emotions calmly, with the language of respect for ourselves and for others. We realize we can feel sad without hurting anyone. We can feel disappointed and still choose kindness. And when we do, our relationships begin to change, no longer built on control, but on mutual understanding. Dr. Rosenberg once wrote, "Behind every anger is an unmet need." When we listen deeply enough, anger turns into compassion. Indeed, when we look into our anger with awareness, we see it isn't evil. It's simply the cry of a part of us that feels unseen. When we listen to that cry, the anger dissolves, and compassion takes its place. Nonviolent communication, at its heart, is a journey back to the best part of being human, the part that knows how to listen, how to love, and how to understand. When we speak from compassion, we don't just bring peace to others. We begin to heal ourselves, because every time we choose understanding over reaction, love over judgment, we become a little freer from the pain of the past. And that is what Dr. Marshall Rosenberg wanted to remind us. Use language to heal, not to wound. Words can destroy a relationship, but they can also save it. When we learn to speak the language of compassion, the world around us grows softer, and so does our heart. Use your words to love, not to wound. Words are mirrors of the heart. The way we speak, to others and to ourselves, reveals whether we are living in peace or in pain. Some words feel like a spring breeze, bringing warmth and calm, but some words, sharp as blades, can make a heart bleed. Nonviolent communication reminds us that we always have a choice: to use words to hurt, or to use them to love and to heal. The 4 principles of nonviolent communication, observation, feeling, need, and request, are not formulas to follow, but paths that lead us back to ourselves. When we observe without judging, we see truth instead of prejudice. When we speak our true feelings, we invite others into our inner world. When we recognize the needs behind our emotions, we stop blaming and start understanding. And when we learn to express what we want with honesty, we create space where love can breathe. Nonviolent communication doesn't teach us to speak more beautifully. It teaches us to live more kindly. It asks us to pause before judging, to take a deep breath before reacting, and to choose words that reflect the best within us. Every word born from compassion can become a small seed, quietly planting gentleness and understanding in someone's heart. To speak with love is not a skill. It's a return to being human. It's learning to see each other with kindness, to speak in peace, and to listen with the whole heart. When we can do that, language ceases to be a wall and becomes a bridge, connecting soul to soul. And perhaps, the most beautiful thing in any conversation isn't what we say, but the moment our hearts are truly heard. Because when we speak from compassion, our words become like a spring breeze, softening others and healing ourselves. Thank you for listening until the end. I hope this book helps you rediscover peace in every word you speak and turn each conversation into a quiet act of love.